welcome to my channel. This is Elizabeth with Wandering Soul Enterprises, and today I'm going to be talking about standing up to the shadow man, my experience with sleep paralysis. I've been wanting to do a talk on this topic for a while now, and then this past Monday I experienced another episode. So I thought it would be a good time to go ahead and do the talk now since it's fresh on my mind. So Monday night, I was drifting off to sleep and I closed my eyes, and then after a while, I felt a man sitting down on the edge of my bed, and then he leaned over and started to kiss me, and it felt very real. And at first I thought it was real. Then I started to think, hold on a second, there's not a man over here at my house tonight, so that's unusual. So I opened up my eyes and there was the shadow man, a man-shaped shadow, looming over my chest and pinning down my arms. So I said, "Get off me, go away." And he didn't go away. He held his ground and he started mocking me, and he was like, "Ha, get off me, go away." And then like all his body parts started falling off, and he started making up jokes about it. And he was like, "Oh, there goes my little toe." And I started to realize that I was experiencing sleep paralysis, because this wasn't my first rodeo. Okay, I've met the shadow man before. And I know from experience that the only way to get rid of him is to actually speak out loud, not just like talking in a dream, but actually vocalize and tell him to leave. So it's really hard to do that. It's really hard to speak while you're experiencing sleep paralysis, but I knew that's what I had to do. And with great effort, it can be done. So I summoned up all my mental faculties, all my physical strength, and I was like, "Leave me." And this time, that didn't work. It didn't work the first time. He didn't completely disappear right away, but he did move off to the side of the bed, but he was still crouching there and like holding onto my right arm. So I summoned up my resources again, and I said, "Go away." But he still didn't go away. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna have to be more forceful here. So I did it again. I summoned up all my resources, and I was like, "Die and go to hell." And then the shadow man kind of made this. He kind of tilted his head to the side like this, and he started making like a little sad puppy dog face. And then the little sad puppy dog face started to contort into all these like grotesque demonic expressions and stuff. And I was just sitting there looking at it, and then I prayed, and I prayed out loud, I'm pretty sure. And I was just like, "Dear God, please protect me from the shadow man." And then he just like started to dissolve into the light. And so after that, I still couldn't move. I was still paralyzed, but my eyes were open. I was looking up at the ceiling, but the ceiling didn't look normal. It was like green and purple and all wavy and stuff. And I was 100% sober at the time, I promise. And so I was just kind of laying there for a while, and then eventually all the waves dissipated and the ceiling started to look normal again. And then I started to close my eyes and go back to sleep. And just as I closed my eyes, I heard my son talking in his sleep down the hall. And so I woke up again and I was like, "Dear God, please protect my son as well." You know, because I was worried that like the shadow man was gonna go bother him. So yeah. It was a little unsettling, right? The first time I met the shadow man was really scary. That's back when I was a teenager, back in the 1990s. And I sensed this presence at the foot of my bed, and then it started like pulling the covers off of the bed, and then it grabbed me by the ankles and started pulling on my legs. like into this abyss of darkness, and then I was back on my bed, lying on my back, and then the shadow man was on top of my chest, pinning me down. And then, like, years later, the movie The Conjuring came out in 2013, and there's a scene in that movie. It happens to the lady of the house, the mom or the wife or whoever, and it's almost exactly like what happened to me from what I remember. I don't know. It's been a while since I've seen the movie, but yeah, so it's like, it's one of those tropes. I'm not the only person who's had these types of experiences, right? And then more recently, in 2019, I had another encounter with the shadow man. That's what I call him. I don't know. He's kind of like an incubus, I guess. And so I recorded this in my dream journal. So I was lying in bed, drifting off, couldn't tell if I was asleep yet or still awake. I noticed my large exercise ball was on my chest, and then it rolled off onto the floor, gently bounced off my bedroom wall, and then slowly rolled down the hall into my office. Next, I heard a strange noise coming from my office, and I realized that it was my printer trying to start itself up. And I could hear the noise echoing from my bedside table. And then the echo turned into a man's voice imitating the sounds of the printer. And then it became evident that there was some sort of entity making noise in the shadows on the floor right by my bed. And I told him to go away and leave me. And that's when I realized I was in this dream state, because it was very difficult for me to articulate the words. I think I actually did talk in my sleep, though. The shadowy being took form in the profile of a man. He knelt by my bedside, and for a moment the light shone through, and you can see the color of his skin and hair. And he folded his hands on the edge of my bed, bowed down his head in despair, and then faded away. And then I woke up. So there's a couple of the experiences. I think I've had more, but those are the ones that kind of stick out in my mind, right? And there's a scientific explanation for these types of episodes. It's called sleep paralysis. According to sleepfoundation.org, sleep paralysis is a temporary inability to move or speak while falling asleep or upon waking. And it usually lasts for a couple of minutes, and it's often frightening. And most cases of sleep paralysis include these types of hallucinations. And many times they feature sleep demons like incubi or succubi, sensations of chest pressure, perceiving a presence in the room, auditory hallucinations, and vestibular motor hallucinations. And apparently it's a very common experience. There's lots of different numbers that I came across in my research. So most of the estimates range from like 20% to 40% of the population has experienced at least one occurrence of sleep paralysis within their lifetime. And like I said, the majority of those include some kind of hallucinations, kind of like the sleep demon, like my shadow man. But even though it's a very common experience, but it's even more common in people who suffer from sleep disorders like narcolepsy or sleep apnea, and also in people with psychiatric disorders like PTSD and panic disorder. So in the book Nightmare Land Travels at the Border of Sleep, Dreams, and Wakefulness, Lex Lonehood Nover describes the elements of sleep paralysis as follows. The person experiencing sleep paralysis is aware of what's going on, and they're typically supine. They have a realistic view of the room. Their eyes may be open, which, like, that's when on Monday night, I remember I was looking off kind of towards the side of my bed at the shadow man, and behind him I could see the guitars hanging on my wall, so I knew I was in my room, but he was there too. Except for the eyes, the body's paralyzed. There's a sensed presence in the room, which causes feelings of fear and dread. There's heavy pressure on the chest, difficulty breathing. Auditory hallucinations may occur, such as voices, sounds, vibrations, nonsense language. Other sensory hallucinations might happen, like unusual odors, buzzing, tingling, floating, sometimes feelings of bliss, vestibular motor hallucinations, and out-of-body sensations, which kind of reminds me of like astral projection. And then sometimes the presence takes form and interacts with the person experiencing sleep paralysis. And common tropes include demons, hairy monsters, disfigured people, hooded figures, the devil, witches, hags, and aliens. A lot of people think alien abduction stories have to do with sleep paralysis. So don't tell the alien people that. Just kidding. And then if the person experiencing sleep paralysis can't stop the paralysis, the entity may initiate physical contact, sitting on the person's chest or choking them, as well as making sexual advances. So that's common too, that, yeah, kind of crazy. Nover cites University of Waterloo psychologist J.A. Chain, who suggests the sense of presence and terror are a result of activation of the amygdala. So the amygdala is vigilant, always looking for signs of danger, and when it sees danger or is sensing danger and it can't quickly confirm or relieve the fears, that ongoing state of suspicion continues and it leads to feelings of dread. And according to sleepfoundation.org, the common experience of sleep demon hallucinations can be explained as follows. So normally when we wake up from our slumber, serotonin and other hormones suppress our REM sleep, our rapid eye movement sleep. And so that helps us to become aroused and awake, and increases our awareness. But during sleep paralysis, the serotonin's released, but the body stays stuck in REM sleep mode. And so that causes hallucinations and fear because you're becoming aware, but you're also still dreaming at the same time. And then they were saying that brain disturbances might occur during sleep paralysis, and maybe there are malfunctions in the parts of the brain that are responsible for creating an image of the human body. So that's why it looks all shadowy and stuff. And those parts of the brain also might be responsible for the sexual hallucinations. And then breathing changes occur, and that shallow breathing leads to the feeling of chest pressure, which is why people think there's a demon sitting on their chest. And then cycles of fear and panic start to trigger the fight or flight response, and it just kind of is like a downward spiral. It exacerbates the frightening context of the situation. So it's a fascinating phenomenon. It can be really terrifying. It definitely was the first time, but now that I know what it's all about, I'm not as scared anymore. Plus I'm super courageous and brave now. But I love learning about the scientific explanations, but it's also really interesting from the paranormal, spiritual point of view, because sleep demon hallucinations are universal, and they're a cross-cultural phenomenon. All different cultures all across the globe have some sort of cultural explanation for this type of phenomenon. It's really interesting. So like the ancient stone tablets from Babylon describe how Gilgamesh's father Lilu seduced women in their sleep, and how Lilith, which was like the origin of Lilith, a female demon, appears to men in erotic dreams. And they think those two were like the origin of all the stories about incubi and succubi and that kind of thing. In Egypt, the phenomenon is attributed to the jinn, like the genie type of things. And then in Cambodia, the entity is thought to be a ghost dispatched by a sorcerer, or a demon wanting to cause fear, or a person who's died. And in Japan, the sleep demon experience is called kanashibari and may be related to a Buddhist deity that the monks could harness to paralyze people from afar. And there's a similar idea in yoga too, like yogic sorcerers can, send people can paralyze people from afar using their powers, right? That's another theory on this. And then in Brazil, there's something called the pisadeira, and it's an old woman who lies in wait on the roof and comes into the house and walks on the chest of those who fall asleep on their backs with a full stomach. And then in Newfoundland in Canada, there's the old hag. And in medieval Europe, they had the nightmare or the Mara, which originally nightmare was describing the phenomenon of sleep demons. And nowadays we just talk about it as any scary dream, but originally it was talking about sleep paralysis and the sleep demon experience. Also, there's a famous painting from 1781 called The Nightmare by Henry Fuseli. So you might Google that. I was gonna try to be fancy and have a picture of it pop up, but I'm not that fancy. So you can Google it if you want, but it really illustrates the concept. It shows this lady passed out and there's a demon sitting on her chest and a black horse in the background. Like it's just really creepy. So treatments for sleep paralysis. For medical treatments include treating any underlying sleep disorders or psychiatric conditions, practicing good sleep hygiene, avoiding alcohol, drugs, caffeine, stress, all of that stuff. And then other methods also, according to the antique manuscript, the Malleus Maleficarum, spiritual tactics for dealing with the shadow man include exorcism, confession, making the sign of the cross, and reciting Hail Marys. But personally, I found that just simply telling the demon to leave or praying for protection from God and the angels usually works pretty well. This last time he kind of was a little resistant, but finally when I did pray, he dissolved. And another key thing is you have to actually say it out loud, because that's what breaks the paralysis, right? So you can't just be talking in your dream, you have to actually speak. It's really hard. And then some people say like moving your fingers or your toes will break the paralysis, so that's something else you could try. And then some folks say that the shadow man is an unacknowledged aspect of your subconscious, that you should be kind and embrace it and gently ask it what it needs. But from my point of view, if the shadow man wants to have a meaningful heart-to-heart conversation with me, he better come correct. I don't like this violent, rude, malevolent behavior, the untoward sexual advances. So I'm not gonna put up with that when I could just very easily pray him away. So that's just what I usually rely on. And if it was something that happened a whole lot, I'd probably be concerned that I might have some sort of a sleeping disorder and maybe would try to ask a doctor to help me with that. But yeah, I don't think it's that serious. Another thing I wanted to kind of bring up is that, I don't think I'd want to do any sort of treatment that's going to completely block off my ability to experience sleep paralysis, because it's actually kind of interesting in a way. I mean, it's kind of scary, yeah, but it's been a transformative experience for me in learning how to confront my fears, because as a teenager experiencing it for the first time, I was really terrified. But this latest episode that happened on Monday night, I mean, it was a little unsettling, but I looked him right in the eye. I saw his face contorting, and I felt completely secure and protected and confident that I was going to be able to overcome his presence. And I just told him to get lost, And then as I was getting prepared for today's talk, I got really intrigued with that whole thing about, well, one of the symptoms is sometimes vestibular motor hallucinations. And so that really reminds me of what people are talking about when they talk about astral projection, which is something I've tried experimenting with and would really like to be able to experiment with more. And so I'm kind of seeing now like this sleep paralysis state between wakefulness and sleep is kind of the gateway to be able to have that out of body experience. So I think it's kind of interesting. So anyway, what do you think? If you've ever experienced sleep paralysis, hallucinations, let me know in the comments below. No judgment here. You know, we don't stigmatize this stuff on my channel. And I'd like to hear from you and see what your thoughts are. And thank you for tuning in. If you like my content, please be sure to subscribe to my channel, hit the like button, and sleep well. Take care. Bye.